referred to for many years as 42 lands, even though the actual number of lands varies. He's playing 35 in his 61 card deck. His utility is basically what this deck is trying to do is capitalize on exploration and life from the loam, plus a variety of utility lands like Wasteland, Rashad Port, Manlands, Caracas, Tabernacle, to just build a fortress. It's very hard to interact with because you're doing this all by lands, which are hard to destroy, and he can just get back with loam, eventually grinding the game down and winning with some Manlands. So we've seen this deck around for, again, in one of the peripheries of the metagame. This is also a very cost-prohibitive deck. A lot of dual lands, Tabernacle, Caracas, and so forth, which sort of mitigates how many people can actually build this deck, even if they wanted to play it.
You see the less expensive Tranquil Thicket for Jody to start things off. You see Sam with a Grave Crawler, something that he is famous for playing in Legacy, and now we are going to see exploration from Jody. One of the things that really gets this deck humming along as we see a Rashad Port and a Wasteland here.
Yeah, so a very good start for Jody. The deck really would ideally like to find an early exploration because the deck plays pretty fair playing one land a turn even if they have utility, but exploration combined with loam is where this deck starts doing very powerful stuff.
There was a time a couple of years ago, some people in the Open Series, Chris Waltrek is the name that jumps to mind for me. He was one player who was always playing this deck in Open Series and having a ton of success. It is a deck that players that do play it are players that have been playing it for a very long time. You brought up how Tony DeVira, in your local area is always playing Agrolome if he can. Jody Keith has been playing this sort of lands deck or an Agrolome deck for a very long time. Over 2 years he's been playing this in Legacy.
Yeah, and one part of it is Legacy decks are so distinct that if you find something that you like, you're likely to really enjoy playing it. And secondly, the cost of some of these fancier decks, it's such that you can't just, all right, well, I built lands, now I guess I feel like building Reanimator this week, so I'll go get some Underground Seeds. A lot of people just don't have that kind of budget, and so you're sort of stuck with whatever you decide to build the first time around.
As we do see a Carrion Feeder here from Sam Black, a card that you guys may not be familiar with. So we'll bring up that little zombie up on the screen. An ugly zombie, honestly. It can't block like a lot of the zombies can't, but it does have a powerful ability of putting +1/+1 on it when you do sacrifice a creature. And Gravecrawler, pretty good one to sacrifice.
Yep, it was very good in draft. It has fielded some infinite combos in its day, but very rarely has it showed up and constructed just as sort of a value play along cards like Gravecrawler. But
as we do see Jody, he does play a Mox Diamond here, discarding a land to that. Looks like a Cabal Pit.
Yep.
That was a good one in draft, too.
Not really. Those lands, I thought those lands stunk.
Well, that's why I didn't win very much of that format.
Okay.
You know more than me. As we do see an Intuition here. An Intuition is a card in these lands decks that, some people like splashing the blue for Academy Ruins and Intuition, be able to always find them. Some people do not. But you see Jody going with Intuition in his deck. A couple of copies in there.
Yeah, we're finding Loam, I would assume, plus some good utility lands. So he's getting Loam plus Tabernacle, plus one other good Maze of Ith. So
interesting. You and I seem to gravitate towards Tabernacle when we're doing coverage together. Always
We'll
rears
see.
its ugly head.
I think that we'll see if Sam Black's able to dodge the shooter in the clock tower. Other people have been less successful in his position.
We'll see if Sam is able to pass the test. It's kind of interesting, too, because with Sam's deck, with how these creatures come back from the graveyard, he might not even want to pass the Tabernacle test. He might be fine with letting Gravecrawler die because you can just replay it.
Yeah, certainly Bloodghast, Gravecrawler, a lot of these guys you can just have come right back, but I suspect Sam will remember that Tabernacle, but
now, I do see that you have Jody's deck that's in front of you as they are resolving this Intuition. Are there any other spicy lands hiding out in there? I mean, Maze of Ith and Tabernacle, along with Cabal Pit, what I thought was a limited all-star, is in his deck.
He has a singleton Glacial Chasm, which can basically establish a soft lock against damage when combined with Zoran Orb. And other than that, there's nothing too fancy. I mean, 4 copies of Maze of Ith, a Mistress Factory, a Caracas, the Cabal Pit, which is probably about getting random utility creatures that can be irritating, like, Meddling Mage on Life from the Loam, for example, is actually quite annoying. A couple other creatures in that spot, so maybe an opposing Deathrite Shaman that's busting up the Loam.
As we do see Sam examining things here, looking to figure out how he wants to go about beating this Tabernacle, as he's going to start pushing through some damage here. We do know that Jody does have a Maze of Ith in his hand as well, and that's a card we'll bring up on the screen for you guys. You know, a very potent weapon, something that I just searched for with Knight of Reliquary in Maverick decks, but its original home was in these land decks.
Yeah, and you can really see Jody starting to put the clamps down on Sam. He's got Loam plus Wasteland going, which means Sam can't really lean heavily on non-basics. He has Tabernacle, which is forcing Sam to upkeep his creatures. He has Rashad and Port, which allows him to tap any lands that Sam doesn't use to pay for the Tabernacle. And then he's got Loam going. So more of the same stuff is going to start happening.
Yeah, just getting the full engine online right now, as we do see the Bayou from Sam, and he does just pass back. Dredging Loam for the first time this match. We see a Tropical Island, another Life from the Loam, and an Oblivion Ring there for Jody. And of course, Oblivion Ring being in the deck so he can get it back with Academy Ruins.
Yeah, and he's really starting to just exert total control of this game. You know, Sam actually, I believe, is out of basic lands in his deck, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, just 2 swamps here. The rest can be wastelanded. He has 3 Badlands, 2 Scrublands, and a copy of Bayou. Bayou, of course, for the Deathrite Shamans in his deck, as we see Jody play a second Exploration. The one thing that Jody needs right now is just a cycling land, and that really puts the engine on steroids.
Even a second copy of Rashad and Port would, I believe, basically effectively lock this game up.
Yeah. We see Jody bring a couple lands back here. He's made one of many land drops for the turn. You're going to see a Maze of Ith now.
He's got it sorted over in his lands that don't make mana pile.
And there is the Maze of Ith. Patrick, what would you say that is a picture of in Maze of Ith?
I think that's a body that's sort of trapped in the maze.
Okay.
I think it's a person.
That poor fellow.
And so I assume, yep, we see Sam play for the Tabernacle upkeep. But again, it's not really clear how he's supposed to proceed from here.
Yeah, really looks to be a difficult time. As you see, he's going to push across a little bit. Maze of Ith is going to untap that Carrion Feeder. No damage there, but Gravecrawler will land a punch for 2.
I mean, the only thing that Sam can really do is one shot of getting anything going. Is if he can land a Deathrite Shaman, he might be able to break up this graveyard stuff.
Yeah.
But now that Jody has Cabal Pit in play, not even that works, because he's going to be at Threshold soon. And then if Sam ever does find a copy of that card, he can just, if Sam actually does find a Deathrite Shaman, it's not too hard for Cody to just pick it off.
And there you do see Cabal Pit on the screen as Sam is casting a Cabal Therapy, targeting himself for Bloodghast. Cabal Pit, -2/-2. You know, not a card that sees a lot of play in this format, but a nice utility card here for the lands deck. Yep. We've seen some other versions play Barbarian Ring too,
yeah,
so a very similar effect. Yeah. As we see a Dredge here from Jody revealing Engineered Explosive and Intuition and a fetch land, being that, oh, excuse me, it is a Tundra, not a Misty Rainforest.
Alright, so Wasteland, and now Jody is actually at Threshold, so.
Starting to put the clamps down. It feels like, you know, just really putting the gears on. We're going to see Jody take care of that Gravecrawler with the Cabal Pit. Sam does sack it to the Carrion Feeder, making that a little bit bigger. But again, one threat isn't going to do very much against the Maze of Ith, as you see Jody resolving Life from the Loam, getting back those utility lands.
Yep. And winning from here is going to be fairly incidental for Jody. Even Sam putting that Bloodghast in the graveyard doesn't matter too much, because Maze does a lot to check that stuff. And Jody can just recur his Cabal Pit and stop any sort of haste shenanigans.
I didn't think we'd be seeing that today. Recurring Cabal Pits.
Yes, Cabal Pit on Gravecrawler. I would have lost that bet. Yeah. If you asked me at the beginning of the day.
As we see Rashad and Port take down a few lands. Important lands being moved forward here for Jody in form of Tabernacle and Pendrell Vale and Maze of Ith. What can Sam do to break through this? Because again, Sam's deck, you know, it's kind of a machine in what it's trying to do, you know, which is basically abuse Faithless Looting, Cabal Therapy, along with these creatures that all come back from the graveyard. But it's not a deck that contains actually a lot of lands.
Yes.
And you actually just see 20 lands here, as he does play a Scrub land out now from fetching.
And like we mentioned, no more basics.
Yeah, this is, the 2 swamps are his only basics, and again, he only has 6 lands, 6 dual lands and 3 Badlands, 2 Scrub lands at Bayou, and then he does have an Undiscovered Paradise as another land that does tap for mana. I don't see that one very often in Legacy either.
No, you missed him to go off with Undiscovered Paradise, Bloodghast, and the round we had him on camera while you were on break.
Use the term "go off."
Well, I mean, he got it back. It was, at one point it was in his graveyard, and then it was back in play because of Undiscovered Paradise.
As we are going to see Loam, Dredgel, Wasteland of Bayou, and a Mox's Diamond. Jody has the engine online again, just looking for a cycling land, and then he can really just start doing ridiculous things, loaming multiple times a turn, and really just going crazy as we see Cabal Pit take care of the Deathrite Shaman.
And Sam's just had enough.
Yep. And you can see, with the way that Jody played that game, it really did feel, fairly systematic, like he's been doing this for a little while. Doesn't really have to think about his plays and what he's going to loan back and what he's looking to accomplish. Seems like he's done this before and looking to do it again.
So, a very straightforward, just slice through Sam that game. And before we get into the sideboarding,
it's that time again.
It's that time, right about that time. Trivia time for us in the quarterfinals right now. 3 free months of premium. So the way this works is, give your answer, hashtag it SCG Premium. We draw one person, and that winner will receive 3 free months of premium.
All right.
My trivia question for you.
Toughie.
In Jody Key's lands deck, there's a certain legendary land from Legends. It's quite expensive.
It is.
And it has a lot to do with locking out creature decks.
Okay.
Name that legendary land. I actually don't know if it fits inside of Twitter's 140 characters. So hopefully we have enough room. But assuming that we do, hashtag SCG Premium, and the winner will come away with 3 free months of premium.
I hope they can make it. I do.
It just trails off.
Yeah.
Sorry, no winner.
Yeah. Sorry, no one could get it right. It's so sad. As we do go to both players' sideboards here, I have Sam Deckless in front of me, and he is going to be on the play this game since he was soundly crushed in that first game. What we see here are 3 copies of Dark Confidant, which seem rather good here. We have 2 copies of Disenchant, which can help take care of those explorations in Mox Diamonds. A copy of Pithing Needle, which is a bit interesting. That may be joining us. We also see 1 singleton copy of Leyline of the Void. You're also going to find 1 Surgical Extraction. So I think those are the cards that are going to be joining us. Surgical and Leyline of Void, the best of the bunch. But again, there are only 2 copies of those cards.
Yeah, and the 2 Disenchants are also going to be very good here because Jody is overloading Sam's Disenchants in a number of ways between Intuition, Oblivion Stone, Sylvan Library, Zoran Orb. There's all these powerful targets. Jody has 4 copies of Chalice of the Void. Now, this is primarily in land sideboards as a way to stop combo decks. The biggest problem that lands has is it's basically just dead on arrival to combo game 1. You have no clock, no disruption, no counters, nothing. You have nothing that matters. So Chalice of the Void is a way of shoring up that matchup. It's not at its best against Sam, but it can knock off a lot of the Gravecaller shenanigans if he sets it to 1. Another card that he has is a singleton copy of Ensnaring Bridge, which can lock Sam out of combat, of course, and a singleton Humility, which, Sam's creatures are a lot of, they're not the normal Humility targets. We're not talking about Emrakul or Grizzlebrand here, but a lot of what his deck does is comes into play, triggers off, Carrion Feeder, Growing Through Gravecaller, Tide Hollow Scholars comes into play power, Deathrite Shaman doing its thing, and so even though it's not, for the matchup, I'm sure Jody intends it for, I think Humility is also, the singleton Humility is also quite all right here.
I was watching Jody play a little bit earlier today. I think it was like around round 7, and he is boarding in Chalice of the Void against Rug Delver, and he said that one of the reasons, of course, that deck has a million cantrips, obviously, but he said one of the reasons that this card has been so good for me this weekend is that it takes care of Deathrite Shaman, which is annoying for me to play against. And so, obviously that makes a lot of sense, it being able to take care of life from the loam. So that's even a little bit more work that Chalice of the Void has been able to do with the printing of these new cards. Another card that it takes care of in Sam's sideboard is Surgical Extraction.
Yeah, as Surgical Extraction and Relic of Progenitus, 2 very common anti-graveyard cards that people have in their sideboards to break up things like Life from the Loam. So Chalice, for one, incidentally answers a lot of the hate that these decks are going to have for you anyway. And of course, something like Chalice is spectacular against a deck like Rug Delver, which is just all 1s and a bunch of cantrips to sort of glue all their hands together.
And with how good that card is, Patrick, against Rug Delver, you look at Sam's deck, and Sam is also playing a boatload of 1-drops in his deck. 4 Carrion Feeder, 4 Grave Crawler, 4 Deathrite Shaman, 4 Faithless Looting, 4 Cabal Therapy, 4 Thoughtseize. one Tragic Slip, which of course is going to get sideboarded out here, but he has a boatload of 1-drops in his deck as well. So if Jody is able to power out that Chalice of the Void, on 1 via Mox Diamond, it's going to be pretty difficult for Sam to win.
Yeah, and he's part of the problem that Sam's going to have in this matchup is that in most of the time when he's the beatdown deck and the opponent's the control deck, he has all this discard. It's very good. Unfortunately, Jody's deck is fairly resilient to discard. He has Light from the Loam, which obviously that doesn't make any sense to attack with a Thoughtseize.
Yep.
And a lot of his other pieces, he might not have very many spells in his hand to begin with because he's overwhelmingly lands. Secondly, a lot of these spells either aren't integral to his game plan, or he can simply rebuy eventually with Academy Ruins to loop his artifacts. So a lot of the type of cards that Sam leans on to help him out in these control matchups aren't really that effective against Jody's land stack.
Now, it's kind of interesting because we haven't seen lands for a little while. It's a deck that I always keep in the back of my mind. I've played it before in Legacy. I've had quite a bit of success with it for the small amount of time I was able to play with it about 3 years ago. But it's a deck that kind of got pushed out very easily because of counterbalance, as we said. And it's just some other factors, surgical extraction, graveyard decks picking up, what have you. Where do you think this deck kind of holds a place in the metagame? Do you think it's able to crop back up? Because the decks that it's good against, it's insane against.
Yeah, I think that it's matchup against decks that are actually just trying to win by attacking with creatures. I think those matchups are awesome for lands. The biggest issue, as we said, is just the combo matchups. It's just, what does this deck do about Storm? Game 1, really nothing. And then the sideboard games are leaning very heavily on Chalice of the Void, of which you only have 4 copies. So if the combo decks aren't that prevalent, I think lands is a totally legitimate choice. Part of the problem the deck also has in a tournament setting is many people just, when they're picking up the deck for the first or second time, they're not used to the operations. Jody's obviously an exception to this. He was playing very efficiently during his turns. But you just pick up a lot of draws because it takes a long time for the deck to actually kill someone. You're killing them on turn 18 with a Mishra's Factory and a Creeping Tar Pit or whatever. It takes a little while. And if you are slow about your operations, if relatively simple decisions are costing you a lot of time, you're just going to pick up a lot of draws that would otherwise be wins. But the biggest issue to me is just the combo decks.
Yeah, and it's tough because this is the kind of deck that it seems like it beats up on the fair decks, and then the unfair decks it kind of gets crushed by. So where exactly do you want to be in Legacy? It depends on the tournaments, depends on what the metagame is in certain areas. If people are playing a lot of fair decks like Rug Delver, Maverick, the different takes on Bug, this might be a really good place to be. But if you walk into a Storm heavy metagame, as we saw in Las Vegas last weekend, you do not want to be there with this deck.
But Goblins, Merfolk, I'm sure even the Bug matchup's totally fine.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's happy to play against that deck too. But yeah, Storm, Charbelcher, whatever, these decks are just... Game 1 is as close to unwinnable as a matchup can basically get in Legacy.
Yeah. I'm even trying to think of some of the slower combo decks right now because, of course, those Storm decks, those decks are super fast. But some of the even slower, resilient combo decks, you might have a shot there. The one that comes to my mind is High Tide. I can't imagine this deck beating that deck either.
Yeah, basically you have your ports, and that's your interaction.
Yeah.
So if they're able to ever go off over your ports or just turn about you or themselves to get out of it, and also. This deck takes forever to actually kill someone, so you're giving them a lot of time to find their land drops and what have you. So,
as we do see both players here, Sam Black, Star City Games columnist, been enjoying a lot of success over the past couple of years in Magic. Jody Keith, a New Orleans-based player who we have seen make appearances on the Pro Tour and have some success on this circuit as well. Two players battling out. Both know their, kind of fringe decks very, very well. Really, really interesting decks these two players do play.
I think it's pretty charitable to describe Sam's deck as fringe. I think it's. I don't think we're even that far. Lands is a fringe deck.
Sure.
That's definition of fringe deck right there.
This deck is for Sam and Sam alone.
Sam. Sam with his singleton, his one Leyline of the Void to start the game off.
You missed how I was
Cedric almost spit out his water.
I was taking a sip of water on camera. I almost lost it. Sam with the old had it. One Leyline of the Void. It stings even more because Jody has his deck list. So he knows there's only one.
So looking at We're looking at Mox Diamond and 2 life from the loans here. And if Sam has a Cabal Therapy, we can basically... I mean, this is a huge edge, because even if Jody finds one of his answers to that ley line, so many of his loams are going to be out of the deck.
Yeah.
And he's taking the Mox Diamond, which means he might have Cabal Therapy.
Yeah, boy, and if he does have Cabal Therapy, that's going to be pretty gross.
Why would you play more than one ley line? You only want to draw the one.
That's so true.
It's just math.
Do you see Jody's face? Look at
I'm trying to keep it together.
Jody looks like he's a little bit upset, and reasonably so, as there is only one ley line in Sam's deck. Unbelievable by Sam, as we see he draws a Bayou for the turn. He's going to put a Marsh Flats into play and move on down to 17 because of that Thoughtseize as well. Sam did not like the way things, progressed in game one, so he just starts off with a haymaker this game in Leyline of the Void.
The mine's just one of in Sam's sideboard. I just love.
Yeah,
it makes the coverage so awesome.
Yeah, just gross.
Yeah. How about this? And now he doesn't even have to worry about drawing redundant ones for the rest of the game, because that's the only one.
Yeah, that's the annoying part of Leyline of the Void. After you have the first one in play, you don't want any more.
Yeah, so just play the one.
Mathematically, it works.
Yeah, it's just math.
As we are going to see a Tide Hollow Sculler here from Sam, the old artifact zombie from, boy, what set was that from? I feel old.
Sculler was in charge of Lara Block.
Yes.
And Jody, having drawn a comically bad Crucible of Worlds for the turn, which Sam is going to take as the loams are for the time being shut off.
Which card's worse right now, Crucible or Life from the Loam?
Crucible is at least a permanent he could cast and put into play.
Okay.
And eventually break out of the ley line and then play his loam.
Sure.
Playing loam is actually 2 mana, nothing happens.
Oh. As we do see the Sculler on the screen there, the bigger, better Mesmeric Fiend in some ways. As Sam does draw a card, draws a Verdant Catacombs. Sam looking for just, one more piece, I think, Patrick, to add to the clock. So we do see a Pithing Needle here, along with Goblin Bombardment. The ragtag group of characters.
Yeah, can we take a photo of this board, please? Bayou Scrubland, Badlands, Tide Hollow Sculler, Pithing Needle, Goblin Bombardment, Leyline of the Void. Don't try this at home. I'm just telling you, Sam's an expert. You just can't do this.
You can't replicate that success. As we do see a Tabernacle Pendrel Veil.
Sam setting aside one of his lands.
Yeah, I don't think so. You're not going to get me. We'll find out exactly what that Pithing Needle is named.
I think you put it on Maze.
In Maze? Okay, sure. That makes sense.
Maze.
That makes sense. We'll see a Mox Diamond, and now we're going to see a Curse Totem. And that's a card I haven't seen for a while, so hopefully we can bring that up on the screen. That's a 2-mana artifact, and I know it's very, very powerful, and there's a creature that has that ability too.
Creatures lose activated powers.
Yes, thank you. Players cannot play
it's anything.
Yeah, any creature abilities require an activation
creature abilities,
cost.
right. So take that, Carrion Feeder, and Deathrite Shaman.
I don't think so.
Ooh, and Jody's found an Enlightened Tutor. Does he have anything sweet to go get here? He doesn't have enough mana for Oblivion Stone. I mean, he can go get... I suppose he can go get an Ensnaring Bridge, but it's hard for him to keep his hand empty because he's got those loams. Engineer Explosive's not bad here.
Yeah, it's not the worst. Engineer Explosives on 2 is, it's okay. As it, it blows up a lot of different stuff, actually. It blows up Goblin Bombardment, it blows up Sculler, and it blows up the Curse Totem. And we are going to see an Enlightened Tutor. So let's see what Jody's going to get here.
It's one of 2 Enlightened Tutors in Jody's deck.
Tutors for a lot of good cards in his deck. Obviously, Exploration probably be his #1 priority in most games. But we do see him move Engineered Explosives to the forefront here.
And he's going to get any of the explosives. Also, I mean, there is some argument for setting this thing to 1, right? Because, that Python Needle, the Maze event actually holds off a lot of Sam's action for the time being. Gives you some time. But I guess the 2s does the same thing because the Scholar is the only attacker that Sam has. So
yeah.
Just set it to 2.
Also, another interesting thing that Jody can do with that Enlightened Tutor post board, he can search up the old Chalice of the Void.
Yep.
And we are going to see an Engineered Explosives 4/2 here.
Sam's untaps.
Oh, and you see a card in Sam's hand. He does have an Oblivion Ring in there right now as well. Another one of them in his sideboard. To go along with that one Leyline of the Void and that one Pithing Needle.
Sam is triggering the Tabernacle. Sacking his Verdant Catacomb. Finds a basic swamp and pays. The Bayou in Sam's deck just for the activated power on Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, just the green end on Deathrite Shaman, that's it.
This is a bizarre board.
This is why we put it on, baby. We've seen just about enough Rug Delver versus Esper Stoneblade in my day. These two decks are just outrageous in what they can do. And I love that you get board states like this in this format where just cards that some players wouldn't even consider to be good in Legacy are out here and just having a huge impact. So we see Sam draw Thoughtseize for the turn. We're going to see an Oblivion Ring take care of that.
Oblivion Ring added to Sam's board of weirdos.
If you didn't take a picture before, you should probably take one now.
Yeah.
This game state is unbelievable.
He just found a Chalice of the Void. We're going to set that to 1.
Okay. That'll shut off a lot of Sam's stuff. Now Jody just needs to find an answer for this Tidehollow Sculler, as it actually shuts off a lot of Sam's relevant draws right now.
Yeah, but Jody's really floundering here. I mean, he has just going to die to a lone... Ooh, a Creeping Tar Pit. That's pretty good. You can potentially answer that Tidehollow Sculler just by trading. Sam drew another Thoughtseize.
Here comes the Sculler again. And Sam
says go.
Just does say go. So let's see what Jody draws this turn. He draws a Windswept Heath. So it does look like he's going to be able to activate that Creeping Tar Pit and attempt to block if Sam does decide to move in.
Sam again paying for the Tabernacle. Draws a Grave Crawler. Hand is getting jammed with one casters here.
Now you have to wonder, is Sam okay with making this trade here?
I don't think so.
And look, you see the smile on Sam's face. I didn't think he was going to be in this board position. You see a Tranquil Thicket here for Jody. And he's just going to pass back.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to take any more hits from the Sculler, so... We've drawn another Sculler.
We have.
So I'm assuming that we're going to look, yep, Tranquil Thicket and 2 Loams.
Jody says, you can have this one.
And now that we have a backup Sculler, I would have to assume we're happy to trade the 1 because the Crucible still doesn't matter very much.
Yeah, probably okay with getting in now.
Oh, that's actually good for Sam to pass because he just lets Jody use his mana this turn, that turn to block, instead of having to hold up to block this turn.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so no point in attacking that turn because Jody had his mana at the ready to activate his Tar Pit.
And so now we see a Wasteland here.
Ooh, a second Goblin Bombardment.
Boom! In come the Scullers.
Jody contemplating his move here.
He's
break the Heath and fall to 7.
And one thing that Sam does not have in this deck and never really has had in The Walking Dead is any Wastelands. He does just play 20 lands, a whole lot of fetches to go along with those dual lands, 2 swamps, and Undiscovered Paradise. So Jody's really in no danger of having any of these lands blown up.
Yep.
As we do see a Creeping Tar Pit looking to jump in front of the 1 with the Crucible.
Given that, Sam's deck is trying to go off in some spots with Gravecrawler, by recasting it, it's very hard for him to justify putting colorless lands in his deck like Wasteland.
Yeah. As we do see, Cody does block with the Creeping Tar Pit, and then before damage resolves, use Rashadan Port to be able to tap one of Sam's lands inside combat. But the attack does knock Jody down to 5, and again, he is, as you said earlier, floundering, looking for something to get himself out of this situation.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some big draws in cards like Oblivion Stone, Certainly engineered explosives he could even set to 4 at this point, get the ley line off the table, maybe start moving, but doesn't have a lot of time. And this land stack is just so much less impressive when it doesn't have loam going. It's just not the same deck.
Yeah. Now you see Jody draws a Teleria West for the turn, as the players are talking back and forth. And of course, Teleria West allows you to search up and transmute for things that cost 0, which are lands.
Yep. So we can, in theory, find, say, another Creeping Tar Pit to try to trade. A lot of his other options, again, these are almost all the cards in his deck are predicated on having loam going. So can he go get Glacial Chasm? Sure, but instead of generating a soft lock, it's just going to buy him a little bit of time. You can go get Zernor, but it's the same thing. You can't sustain those cards indefinitely without having Life in the Loam.
So let's see what route Jody decides to take. Creeping Tar Pit seems like a very good one, but again, Zernor, about the same, seems okay again. But as you said, it's not anything that locks the game up.
I mean, arguably, it's actually better to get Mishra's Factory here because the Factory can make itself a 3/3 on defense.
Sure.
Which actually just stops the Sculler altogether. So he has that. He has engineered explosives to look at. He has other utility lands. I mean, no end of options here. So let's see. He's going to decide on... thumbing a Mishra's Factory. Still mulling over his search.
Decisions. I mean, this is a crucial one that he does need to get right because he is under the gun a little bit here by the Tide Hollow Sculler. Something else I did not think I'd be saying today.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Factory is the best thing for him to go get. And you can see that he also brought in the Humility. That is in his deck now. And, yep, and he settles on Mishra's Factory.
Okay.
A winner factory, only the most baller factories will do.
Only the best.
Yep.
Only the best.
And with these turns taking as long as they do, you have to wonder, it's like, does it just make it more likely that Sam's gonna forget about that Tabernacle?
Can't forget about the shooter in the clock tower.
No. Because we've seen too much already.
Yeah, you do not want to forget about that shooter in the clock tower as we see Sam present Jody's deck back to him. And safe.
Yes, nice.
Sam draws. Disenchant.
Perfect.
Nailed it. As we're going to see a disenchant target the challenge of the void.
Sir.
Get that out of my office.
Now we can start. Now we've unlocked all those ones in our hand.
And now Sam can actually start the Gravecrawler machine gun via Goblin Bombardment because, oddly enough, Tide Hollow Sculler, even though it is an artifact, somehow it's a zombie artifact?
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. He sure is right.
Not the best design space Wizards have ever gone to, in my opinion. It's the colored artifact.
I love it. I think it's great.
It's really nice to be able to tell someone what's an artifact. Well, it's something without colored mana in its casting cost, as opposed to saying, what's an artifact? It's anything that says artifact on the tagline. That's whatever.
Teach their own. As we see Gravecrawler go upstairs, the game designer portion of you coming out. We see Gravecrawler coming back for more. And now the real combos online. Joe, do you think you have a combo deck? No, sir.
Yep.
Goblin Bombardment, Gravecrawler with a zombie. That's talking combo.
There's a Rashad Import.
But you're right. You said that Jody's deck is soft to combo.
Yeah. You just didn't know it was like that combo.
We actually mean any combo.
Yeah, any combination of cards that are good with one another.
Yeah, dead. As we see that game, Sam Black moving along, making it 1-1 right now, as Jody will be able to play for Game 3.
I can't. If I was in Sam's position, I wouldn't be able to keep a straight face after that one.
Yeah, after those draws.
Yeah, this is the one ley line, Goblin Bombardment. The one is how many Python Needles are in here? One Python Needle, very good in that game.
How many Oblivion Rings? One.
One, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
How much card drawing in the deck? Zero. Going back, yeah, Sam just needs a mixture of, some artifact removal, and a little bit disruption that's not predicated on attacking Jody's hand.
Yeah.
So Oblivion Ring, very good for that job.
Yeah, of course, there are plenty of permanents for Jody.
Graveyard. And all of our other remaining matches, you can see behind Sam, there's one in progress. Every other match is in Game 3.
Slugging it out.
Yeah.
They want that title. They do want that trophy.
This was Sam's one loss in the Swiss rounds, by the way.
Oh, okay.
He played and lost to Jody in the Swiss rounds.
So maybe Sam has formulated a new game plan here after taking the beatdowns from Jody during the Swiss.
I mean, one ley line's a good start. That's a really good place to start.
Had it.
Don't need a second one. So?
Second one's for losers.
Yep. In fairness, if that card was Surgical Extraction instead, it arguably would have even been better for Sam, because then there would have been no threat of Jody ever even breaking out of it, you know?
Sure.
That ley line was quite powerful, but you could imagine a world where Jody gets an Explosives for 4, and then, you know, Chalice for 1 still locking out all Sam's action, and then he can slowly start turning over his Loam engine. But Surgical Extraction would have just ended, it probably would have just ended the game on the spot.
Yeah. So we see Jody really moving some cards in and out here. And the interesting thing for Jody's deck is that it can really move around some slots here. It can move around. It can move out some lands, in for some spells. It can do vice versa, move out some spells, board back in some lands. You can just move out spells for spells. I mean, there's a lot of different things that Jody's deck can do here. I mean, you see a Bajuka Bog in his sideboard. Even that card could be okay against Sam, oddly enough.
Oh, I think that the Bajuka Bog's almost certainly in his deck.
Yeah.
And earlier versions of lands were leaning very heavily on Mana Bonds. That was the power card of the deck. Once Mana Bonds is in your deck, you had to play infinite lands.
Yeah, a ton of lands.
Because every spell you draw is a disaster when you're trying to Mana Bonds your opponent out. By de-emphasizing that and leaning more on exploration, you lose some of the explosiveness that Mana Bonds enables, but you get to play some actual spells.
Yeah.
I mean, he's actually got, you know, a fair amount of utility and disruption in his deck, whereas some of the previous land decks that I've seen in my time that I've played against are just, if they don't have Loam going, they have nothing going, because the entire deck is, 100% of the deck is predicated on having Loam going. Not to say Jody's isn't, you know, leaning on Loam, but he can actually kind of play Magic if he doesn't have that card. He's able to hold off Sam there for some number of turns. So,
and we do have a tweet here from Joshua St. Amand saying to you that for Tide Hollow Scholar, it's a zombie cyborg. So that's how it's a zombie artifact. It's a cyborg.
I really doubt it's an actual cyborg in the... I don't think Magic's IP, as I understand it, has supported cyborgs very much. There's no cyborg block, as far as I know.
Cyborg block constructed.
I mean, I would be intrigued as to what the format had to offer, but as far as I know, we've never seen it.
That'd be one hell of a Planeswalker, probably.
Yeah.
Whatever Planeswalkers are in that set. Probably start with a million counters.
Yeah.
Right? How are you going to stop them?
Yeah, Karn's the closest thing we've probably had to a cyborg, and I mean, he's no RoboCop or whatever.
I'd take Karn in a fight versus RoboCop.
Terminator.
I'll take Karn.
History's great cyborgs.
I'll take Karn against those guys.
I don't know if RoboCop's technically a cyborg, but he has a helmet and shoots laser beams, right? That's close enough.
Feels like a robot. Feels like a cyborg. Feels like a cyborg.
From the Vault cyborg. Yeah, I would.
First in line.
All the Karns.
What Tide Hollow Scholar.
Tide Hollow Scholar,
yep.
Sure.
Either Sworn Canonist.
Dragon Engine.
Yeah.
It's kind of, sort of like, I feel like it's in, I feel like it's close, right? Oh, Urza's Avenger? That thing, the old Antiquities art with the blueprints, that thing is definitely a cyborg. It's got like a crossbow and like a sword, shapeshifter, kind of a cyborg looking dude in the art. This is taking me back to some fond childhood memories.
Yeah, gonna be tough to stop those guys. They just keep right on ticking. Gonna be tough.
Antiquities has got to have some other sweet cyborg-looking dudes.
Sweet everything
in
that set, without question.
Oh, Su-Chi? He's pretty cyborgy.
That's a 4-mana 4/4?
Yeah, if he dies, you mana burn for 4.
Whoa, mana burn's, yeah, it's gone. It's gone. There's no punishment anymore.
Back in the day, it was a 4/4/4, and if it died, you took 4.
That was like the premier threat in like the mud decks, I think. Before Lodestone Gullum came around, who's also probably a cyborg. Yeah. Or it may be a Gullum, but feels like a cyborg.
Yeah, I mean, Su-Chi he had his moment in the sun, actually for probably too long. Juggernaut, too. Juggernaut got so much play given how stinky it is.
Beatdowns. Beatdowns. Must attack, always.
Every deck started off 4 Plow, 4 Disenchant, 4 Bolt. Yeah, gotta get my 4 Juggernauts in there.
That's how Magic was meant to be played when it was designed.
All right, 15 minutes of sideboarding are up, and we're on to our third game. Does Sam have any turn 0 effects? Does he have the
That look on Sam? I knew it! I knew it! Yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh,
Sam. It's the perfect number.
Jody,
the perfect number of ley lines.
Jody, you have to be kidding me.
Jody's thinking a lot on his first turn now.
Yeah.
And we might have had our sequence broken up a little bit.
As we see a turn 1 Verdant Catacombs here from Jody. That one is exiled, my friend.
Yep. Oh, Sam. How to keep a straight face.
Yeah, no, he was cracking. He was cracking. I knew he had it. He was cracking when he said keep. I knew he had it already.
Oh, man.
He was trying not to smile as he was just going to break Jody's spirit again.
So he does have Exploration at least. He can function a little.
Well, you've seen Exploration.
He doesn't look like he has a loam hand. He actually looks like he's just kind of. He has Exploration plus lands. So
we see Horizon Canopy, another Exploration. All right, so he's playing the game straight up.
Yeah. I assume this is going to be trouble for Jody, but for the time being, like you said, just kind of playing it straight.
So we see Teleria West as well. So he does have 3 lands in play already. He is at 19, actually 18 because of Horizon Canopy. So we will get that updated there for you guys. Every point does count here for Sam. As you see, Sam has drawn and moved forward a Cabal Therapy.
And now I think that he was almost certainly just going to play Deathrite Shaman this turn, but now drawing Cabal Therapy puts a wrinkle in it because maybe he wants to go after a card like Engineer Explosives.
Yeah.
Maybe he wants to go after a card like Oblivion Stone. There's now with Jody having actually played out some real cards here.
Sam wants to get the info here.
Maybe Chalice of the Void would be named.
Yeah, we'll see what he named, and he named a miss. We see Wasteland and Teleria West in Jody's hand. All right, let's see what Jody draws.
I assume we must have named.
Looks like we will find out exactly what the name was here. He named Crozen Grip.
Okay. There's 4 of those in 4 of those in Jody's sideboard.
Yeah, so perfectly reasonable name there.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see if Jody can find one of his 4 Crozen Grips to deal with Sam's 1 Leyline of the Void.
But even still, he just doesn't have any. He has nothing going.
Yeah.
You know? He'll probably need to break out of this Leyline at some point, but. So he has Loam, and it looks like he's just on a Teleria West.
A Loam, a Teleria West, and a Wasteland in his hand.
So does he have any good zeros to go get from this spot? I guess he can try to go. The problem is whatever he gets, he kind of needs to play in the same turn because Sam has that therapy in the graveyard. So he can't really. I mean, he can Teleria West for a land, but if you want to get something like Chalice of the Void, he can't really get it unless he's going to be able to play it in the same turn.
Yeah.
So Jody finds
a Creeping Tar Pit.
All right.
And it looks like he's thinking, I'm going aggro.
Yep.
As you see, Sam draws an Undiscovered Paradise here for the turn. Has a Deathrite Shaman in his hand as he sacrifices a Bloodstained Mire and goes down to 19.
And with Jody's hand configured the way that it is, he doesn't really have a choice. He kind of just has to. I don't think there's really any other target that he can reasonably get. And Joe Bernal and Jacob Wilson, currently the finalists of our second draft open.
Very impressive finals there. Jacob Wilson, a Grand Prix champion over in Chicago with a Jund deck. And Joe Bernal, someone who's had a ton of success on the Open Series and Invitational top 8, started this Invitational, Patrick, 8-0, ended up placing in the top 32.
Yeah, and a relatively recent Standard Open win as well, a couple months back. The highest profile draft Open finals since, well, probably me and you, I would guess.
Yeah, in just 2 extremely close games that you just struggled to pull out. Some would say you got incredibly lucky drawing a Johnny Color of Pride every game on turn 3, but that's anyone's game.
So I got a mono white beatdown deck. Cedric's got super powerful, 3-color control deck, and he went on the draw, turn 1, land go, turn 2, draw, discard, Harbor Serpent. So I don't know what you want to do about that.
Snap keep, not my fault.
Can't mulligan. Have a Harbor Serpent in my hand, already a mulligan. Can't send back these 6.
Mulligan button broken. As we see Faithless Looting here from Sam. Sam setting it all up. As we're going to see him discard probably some value discards here. Maybe.
No, I think we're just on lands here.
Maybe. There goes the Undiscovered Paradise and another Bloodstained Mire. So no value discards in Bloodghast, in Cabal Therapy, in Lingering Souls. None of the value discards.
Yeah, he has a Gravecrawler, but presumably no second Goblin to go along with it. Oh, sorry, second Zombie to go along with it.
And the reason you tripped up there and said Goblin was because the Bombardment is hanging out
yeah.
in Sam's hand. The old combo, as we see Deathrite Shaman here. Let's see what Jody can muster.
He just drew a... Looks like a land.
Chances are,
I know that's
yes.
not super helpful.
Chances are it's land. And what's kind of interesting, too, is one of the cards that Jody can draw.
Ooh, Ghost Quarter.
One of the cards Jody can draw is actually just Engineer Explosives now, and he can set it for 4. Blue with the Tolaria West, black with the Creeping Tar Pit, green with the Tropical Island, and white with the Horizon Canopy to bust up that ley line.
Yep. The issue here, of course, is that Cabal Therapy is still lingering in the graveyard, so he kind of has to drop it because he just kind of has to naturally draw it because he can't Tolaria West for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Or he could find it through Enlightened Tutor, I suppose, as well would work.
As we see a Savannah and now Wasteland take care of that Badlands, and he does kick it back to Sam. Sam does draw a Swamp for the turn. Sitting pretty with a good amount of mana, 2 Swamps, Deathrite Shaman being able to tap for any color. And Sam considering his options as he has a Gravecrawler, a Goblin Bombardment, and a Mystery Cod.
Does he want to flashback the... Alright, there's Goblin Bombardment and Gravecrawler, and he's going to keep the land in the hand. Probably next turn, flashback his Faithless Looting. Try to find some more action.
You see Jody draw a card for the turn. See what he's able to find. Looks like a Wasteland was his draw step.
Now that Ghost Quarter is theoretically powerful for Jody if he can get out of this ley line, because Sam's just on the 2 basics. It's totally reasonable for Jody to actually Wasteland Sam and then Ghost Quarter lock him as well.
Yeah.
But we are getting ahead of ourselves a little bit first. Jody is going to have to find a way to answer Sam's bizarre board.
Bizarre is definitely the word. Sam looking for just one more zombie to kind of set things off here. Let the machine gun load up and start firing away on Jody's life total.
I'm really surprised Sam isn't just flashing back straight away. Yeah, his hand's just 2 lands, so I would really want to get this Faithless Looting off this turn.
Yep. And Sam does draw 2 new fresh ones. We see Bombardment and Bayou.
Sure. So Sam's hand pretty stinky here. It's just lands and a Bombardment. So he's going to get rid of the land and the Bombardment.
And now we see the
Gravecrawler comes across for 2.
How? Knocking Jody down to 16. And now we see a value from Sam, and he just passes back. Jody draws.
Looks like another Wasteland.
And you do see the Wasteland there take care of the Bayou.
All this is well and good, but that was a port.
Yep.
All this is well and good, but he's still not really answering any of Sam's board here.
Now it is interesting because we see the Ghost Quarter, and we do know that Sam only has 2 Swamps in his deck, so that actually acts as a Wasteland type strip mine card as well right now.
So congratulations to Jacob Wilson, who is now our second Draft Open champion, defeating Joe Bernal in the finals.
He cannot be stopped. The youngster from the West Coast just cannot be stopped in the game of Magic right now. Grand Prix champion at the young age of 17, and now a Draft Open champion. As you can see him fixing his hair, getting ready for his photograph.
Another port. And so Sam running out of mana here. And there's Dark Confidant, which is going to be very challenging to get into play now that those ports and wastelands are starting to whittle down Sam's mana. With his life total so high, and the board just ground down to a halt, where other players doing anything that powerful, it would be awesome for Sam to be able to get a Confidant into play.
And he's going to put it into play right now via the Polluted Delta and the Deathrite Shaman.
Sweet.
So he is going to take the turn off with attacking the Deathrite Shaman, get a Badlands, give Jody a Wasteland target, and put the Confidant into play, get some card draw going, and add to his clock.
And diversify his threat base a little bit here because he's all in on ones on the board. So getting a 2 into play is very nice for him as well.
So we do see Dark Confidant join the party. Gravecrawler come across for 2 more, knocking Jody down to 11. And to me, it looks like Sam is just looking to find, again, that one more zombie so he can really start the machine gun effect of Goblin Bombardment plus Gravecrawler, as we do see a Windswept Heath here from Jody to go along with that Life in the Loam in his hand that he can't really do much with.
So, yep. He's drawn some good mana denial lands, but that's not, that's not the part of the game that Jody needs to check right now.
Yeah. As you do see,
Commandant trigger.
Show us a Cabal Therapy, knocking Sam down to 18. Sam's converted mana cost in this deck. His spells are incredibly low, highest one being Leyline of the Void, and there is only one of those, and of course it is in play.
It starts the game in your opening hand, so.
You see the Swamp taken care of as well. Sam draws his card for the turn. It is a Surgical Extraction.
Yep. Not at the most valuable since Jody's graveyard is already on lock because of the loam, but
you see Sam is going to cast Cabal Therapy, and he said, take care of that Life in the Loam most likely. But we'll see. Yep. Okay. So Life in the Loam was just a mystery card for Jody there. Sam didn't know exactly what card he had in his hand as we come across for 5. Jody sacks immediately, so.
Well, we're just jumping in front of this Deathrite Shaman with our Sam Black missing his Cabal Therapy and Intuition.
You see Jody jumping at the opportunity to trade with Deathrite Shaman right now. I have a feeling we may see a Goblin Bombardment activation here from Sam. Let's see who he jumps in front of there with that Creeping Tar Pit.
I mean, it's certainly not Gravecrawler. It's Deathrite Shaman or Dark Confidant here.
It is going to be the old Deathrite Shaman. Bombardment going upstairs, knocking Jody down to 9. Oh, we're actually just going to take out the Tar Pit by itself. Okay.
Yep. Again, I like this play from Sam. It's a hedge against Jody drawing a sweeper.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
And then we just see Confidant come across for 2 then. So I guess Jody thinking he can just ride Confidant to or excuse me, Sam thinking he can just ride Dark Confidant to victory.
Yeah, and if he can't, if something goes wrong, it's better for that Creeping Tar Pit to not be in play, of course.
We see another Deathrite Shaman here from Sam. Jody going to take care of the Scrubland, going to take care of the Badlands with both the Rishadan ports. And keep it moving, as his draw step for the turn was a Mox Diamond. Dark Confidant coming across, knocking Jody down to 4.
And there's a Deathrite Shaman, so any zombie or just another turn of attacking and activating Deathrite Shaman or just finishing off with the bombardment. There's a Caracas, and there's just a handful. It's a handful, and Sam Black and his Leyline of the Void wins 2-1 over Jody Keith.
We call them one-ofs in the business. Some of my friends call them fun-ofs. Those are very fun. for Jody Keith, but Sam Black moving on to the semifinals with The Walking Dead, a deck that only he can win with as he's mastered it. But I mean, he always does look good playing it.
Yeah, and I mean there's no other way to put this. Sam has to get pretty lucky, I think, to win this match.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
That first game, you saw Jody, without leyline or surgical extraction, no graveyard threats. Sam's draw was even fine. I mean, he had a clock and disruption and what have you, but Jody was able to set up a fortress very quickly.
And Jody's hand in that third game was just perfectly fine. The hand that he kept, he had exploration. It looked like he may have had life in the loam as well. Maybe not, but he did have an exploration hand. Seemed like a perfectly reasonable hand. And then Sam having the one of Leyline of the Void just shut everything off and just really blew it up.
Yeah, and not only was his hand fine, it was also not graveyard oriented.
Yeah.
Even that turn one Leyline didn't. It obviously affected his hand and his whole game going forward. But his hand was just 2 explorations and 5 lands with some utility lands. So even if Sam has, even if he has his leyline there, you still got some game, at least for a little while.
Yeah.
But he could never really get out from underneath that leyline, and he drew a lot of mana denial lands. After Sam had already gotten ahead on the board, already had a Deathrite Shaman to provide him with some mana. And so, Jody was just never able to get any traction in any of those sideboarded games. The only time he looked like he had a shot at either of those games is when he had Chalice on 1 that looked like it was locking out a lot of Sam's action and maybe would give Jody enough time to find an engineer explosives or something to get out, but then Sam ripped a disenchant and then was able to deploy his hands, and that was that.